Hey everybody, David R. Becker here with BeckerArt, and today I want to talk to you about grays and mud, making mud. This is something I get from my students a lot at telling me that, oh, I can't mix any good grays, they're all muddy, or I'm working and everything it gets muddy. Well, it's really not. Mud is a little bit different than what you think it is. And so a lot of times with the color, gray is a muddy color, right? So if you look at what I have here, you're going to see that these are a lot of grays. And grays are basically colors that are muted down to where they're gray. And so mud is a whole different thing. And I know my teacher, Irving Shapiro, always said that the mud is when you're mixing your colors too much onto your paper. So it's not so much that you're mixing the color gray or mud. You're not making mud that way. You're making mud because you're going over and over and over on your watercolor, basically. So like this piece right here is the grays are on there, but then I went over and over and over. So I went about 3 times on top of each other. And so basically what I would do is, like, if I do it again, I'm taking my color and let's say I'm mixing a gray, or I'm just taking a gray, which is black, mixed with just water. That gives you a gray on white paper. See, it's just black with water makes a gray, right? Now you can make a gray that's warm or a cool gray. So basically, but how do you make mud? Is that you take that gray and put it down on something you already painted. And so you're constantly putting over and over. So here, look at this. I go on top of that and then rubbing it and actually picking up what's underneath it, and that's combining with this. And so that's more of a muddy color because you're taking the different temperatures of gray and painting on top of each other. But that being said, it is still a gray. So mud really isn't about the color, and it's about how you apply. So here I've taken, let me just show you this. I've taken, this is 2 grays, a gray red and a gray just gray. And so what I did here was I wet the paper. What I did is I wet the paper, and then to get a gray is to mix colors. I'll take my lavender here and I'll mix it with maybe an orange, and that'll give it kind of a warmer, kind of more warm gray. And so if I put that down, the warm gray, it's like a warm gray, right? If I want to cool it off a little bit, I'm going to mix more of a blue into it. And so mixing all your colors together, like on your palette, and a lot of times you get grays automatically, but I like to use my lavender, and if you're using complements, they usually make grays. But this is now more of a, I put a little bit more blue in there, so look at how it changes to a more cooler gray. And it's not mud, and it's floating, and it's not mud, but it looks like mud here, right? I mean, that's muddy color. It's just a gray. So you got to decide that you want to start using grays in your work, because grays make your colors look really more vibrant. So if I take a black and then just put a lot of water in it, that's a gray also. And look at it, if I place it down onto the paper, and now there's a lot of pigment in there. So if I use less pigment, it'll turn more gray, right? So less pigment for the black makes it gray. And it's going to look the same as if you mix 2 colors together. Watch, I'll mix the lavender, and there's no room in here. Let's see, lavender, and how about a little bit of orange? You know, a lot of times it's complement, and maybe a little bit more darker purple. And the complement of purple is what? Yellow. Purple is yellow, so you put some yellow in there, and that should turn it nice and more gray. Now I put some orange in there. That's more of a warm gray, but you can turn your black into those things by putting the color, like using black and then putting red into it to make it more of a warm gray, or a cool gray by putting blue into it. So grays are great when you're using them on your painting, but it's how you apply it that makes it mud. If you apply it not into a wet surface, and let's say I'm putting something on top of this now, and I felt like, oh, I didn't get it the first time, I want to make it a little grayer, and what I'm going to do is rub it in there. So it's you going across the paper too many times, getting in, making it dry, going again, and then with different values, different colors, and that's how it becomes a little bit more muddy. And muddy meaning it's also a little bit more matte, because you use so much pigment that it's building up the pigment and it's getting matte, and it's just too much pigment and it's thick. It's not like the beautiful grays that you can get with a one wash thing. So when you're doing it with one wash, you get these nice granulation, and it is gray. And again, look, watch what happens if I put a really bright color next to a gray. So if I took a red and put it right next to a gray, I mean, it looks really vibrant because gray is not a vibrant color. And so don't mix it up with muddy colors and gray colors, because really they are the same thing. It's how you apply the paint that makes it muddy. And it's also probably not the color that you want, or the gray that you want, when you're putting it over a few more times on the paper that's dry. So like right here, that's more of a muddy color because it's not transparent. For one, you're going to be getting so much pigment on there, it doesn't become transparent, it becomes opaque, and then it's matte. It's like it becomes dry and matte and doesn't look like a nice wash. And so that's what I think most students that I know, that when they say they have a muddy color, it's just that they're overworking their painting, and it's too many times, and they didn't get the nice color gray they wanted. So gray and mud, two separate things, but in some ways the color is the same. It's how you apply your paint onto the paper. So here, if you did want to make this after you do the first wash, I always tell my students that it's always fixable, but what you have to do is you have to rub out, and I'm going to take out that pigment, that first amount. So if I'm going back over this red and I want to make it still a very fresh grayish red, then I have to take out the pigment first as much as I can. Like I'm using a thirsty brush now, and I'm getting rid of that color I just put on top of that. So see how I got it back almost, I didn't get it back to the white of the paper, but I can get it back to where it doesn't look muddy because I put too many layers on. I can make it look like a nice reddish gray. So I'll take red, and what is red, mixed red with is a green. And since I don't have green, I mix cracked gold and a blue, and that'll give me a little bit of a gray. Most of the time, it's either a gray or a brown when you mix complements, and then you can also mix a little bit more blue into this to make it a little bit more gray. See how it's a little bit more brownish gray? And then if I want to take a little bit more blue in there to make it a little cooler, just keep it cooling down. Just more blue. So that's red. The blue, and let's have blue and green, but I'm mixing more of the bluish color than the yellow because that makes it brown. So basically that's a gray right there, right? But now if I wet this surface, let me just wet the surface now, and wet it. What I had to taken out I took out the pigment that was there, so I don't want to make it muddy. I want to have it all by itself. This color can just be put down, and it'll blend a little bit with the red behind it. But then it's not going to pick up the pigment that's underneath because I took that out of there, and it'll be a nice granular wash that was look really granular, and it'll be fresh looking. So, and it'll be gray because I made it gray, and I can even put another color in there. While it's wet, I can just let things float in the water, and it'll look like a fresh wash, and a nice fresh gray wash. And I said like that was a gray, that was kind of a gray red, and so I put red in there, and I can put a little other things in there, but do it now, and I'm putting it in there, and it's going to be nice and floaty, and it's going to float there and just get a nice wash. So again, this one I had done here, if you keep on going over and just constantly piling pigment on top of pigment, that's where you're going to start getting mud, because it's just combining. This is transparent watercolor, and if you're putting it on too thick, it's going to look muddy. And if you keep on rubbing all those different colors together, you're going to get a gray, but it's going to be too overworked because you overworked it. All right, so that's my difference between mud and making a gray. Gray is a really nice color, and I actually, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking a little bit about color and how to use it with your value pattern, because the value pattern is a good thing, but then you can also enhance your value pattern by using grays with your warm and cool colors and your bright colors, because gray makes the bright colors, like I said before, they make them look at how bright they look when they're right next to it. When they're right next to an area that's bright, the grays make it look even brighter. All right, so that's what we're going to be working on, grays and not making mud. And it's just, like I said, it is just the way that you're putting down the pigment. Don't worry about mud, because even if I did this to my palette, look at my palette right here, even if I took all these colors and mixed them together and just keep on mixing all kinds of colors together, yes, that is kind of muddy. It's very muddy, But when I apply it to the paper, look at all these beautiful washes. It's gonna separate. It's gonna look like a nice wash. It's just gonna be dirty, dirty colors because it's a gray, and it could be like using black because black is the same thing. Look at if I use black, it's gonna look like just like this over here. So yes, this is a muddy color. But it's not mud as you think it is. Like what you think when you're talking, when students are talking about, oh, I got mud in my thing. It's just that's the way they apply their paint over and over and over on a dry surface. That's mud. This is not mud. That's just a nice gray color. And actually, look at how nice it does look when you apply it really nicely. But now I would have to leave it. That's the way it's going to be. You know, then you get your first wash in and leave it. All right. Hope that makes sense to you. And I'm hoping that you start using some grays, and it's not mud. Believe me, it's not mud, and it'll make your light colors and your bright colors look so much nicer too. So use some grays in your work, and we're going to try to do some of that this Thursday in my paint along. We're going to be doing an archway in Paris, and so we're going to use some grays and some really bright orange colors for optical scatter again. So that happens every Thursday. I do a paint along at 6:30 Central Standard Time, and visit my website at BeckerArt.net or davidrbecker.com to find out what we're painting and download the photo, and you can just follow along or watch it and then paint it a little bit later down the line. All right. So until this Thursday, we'll see you then. Bye-bye.